The grass in the western basin of Ngorongoro Plains was taller than usual for early dry season, its amber tips brushing against the knees of Ranger Imani as she stepped from the vehicle. The light was fading. Most of the plains lay in shadow now, though streaks of gold clung to the trees on the distant rise. They had come looking for a wounded antelope spotted by a tourist group earlier in the day, but it wasn't antelope tracks that stopped them. 50 meters ahead. Half submerged in the tall grass was a shape too still to be an animal, and too small to be an adult. Imani raised a hand to halt the others. She moved slowly now, signaling the team to stay back. Her boots sank softly into the warm earth as she stepped forward. At 15 meters, she saw the shape more clearly. The tiny arm of a child, pale and unmoving, draped over a bent stalk. And beside the child, pressed close but not touching, the unmistakable arc of a lioness's spine, her fur dusted with red soil, her body curled protectively in a crescent around the child's form. The lioness did not rise. She did not growl. She lifted her head just slightly and blinked. The other rangers waited behind, unsure whether to radio in the emergency or move closer. From that distance, they could not tell whether the child was breathing. Imani crouched slowly, letting the soft evening air settle around her. The lioness stared back, unblinking, her flanks barely moving with breath. A fly landed near her eye. She did not twitch. Her body was still, alert, but not tense. There were no signs of recent aggression, no torn ground, no visible blood on her face or paws. Imani whispered into the radio, one hand cupped over the mic. Child, approximate age 2 or 3, conscious state unknown. No injuries on Lioness, not moving. She's guarding. The word felt strange in her mouth, but it was the only one that fit. The lioness was not stalking, not feeding. Her body, lean and slightly sunken, was curled like a mother's around the child, and the child, a boy, Imani could now see, dressed in a shirt smeared with red clay, was breathing, barely. His chest rose once, then paused. Then again. She could not yet tell if he was injured, but he was alive. That changed everything. The nearest tranquilizer kit was still in the truck. The risk of a dart misfire or panic response was too high. If they rushed her now, the lioness might react. If she reacted, the child might be harmed. If they waited too long, the child might lose consciousness or slip into shock. Either way, every minute mattered. The team made no sudden movements. One ranger whispered, "She's not acting wild. It's like she's—" He stopped, unable to finish. They didn't finish sentences out here. Out here, things didn't always fit words. The breeze shifted. Dust rose near the lioness's paw. Her tail flicked once, low. A warning. Imani knew the signs. She was not relaxed, but she was not preparing to strike. Her ears stayed forward. Her eyes followed every movement, but her body remained draped beside the child, her left paw pressed lightly into the earth where the boy's knee had sunk. One of the field medics stepped closer, just 3 paces behind Imani now. He carried no weapons, only a folded blanket wrapped around 2 bottles of water. When he set them down and stepped back, the lioness's head rose, her gaze fixed on him. Then back to Imani. Her ribs lifted once, then settled. No sound passed between them, just the warm dusk air, the thrum of insects, the breath of something ancient and not yet decided. If they moved too quickly, they might lose them both. If they did nothing, the child might not last the night. The ground temperature was already dropping. Beneath the horizon, the first call of jackals drifted across the plain. Imani stood. The lioness watched her rise. Her eyes followed her. Not with aggression, but with something else. Something rooted in exhaustion or memory. Her body never shifted from its position. Still curled, still protective, still fixed to that small and fragile figure. "Not yet," Imani murmured. They stepped back. The risk was clear. If they tried to sedate her and she panicked, the child could be crushed, clawed, or worse. If they waited and the child's condition declined, he might not wake again. And if this lioness, lean and clearly no longer feeding, was injured or grieving, she might be operating on instincts that didn't follow any pattern at all. But for now, in the last light of day, they watched. A lioness and a child, alone in the tall grass. One shielding, one sleeping, and nothing in the world more delicate than the space between them. They would wait, just long enough to be sure she would not flee, just long enough to let the night make one more decision. Talia left her boots at the edge of the clearing. The soil beneath her socks was warm but brittle, cracked from weeks of sun and wind. The sun had long dropped below the line of fever trees behind them, but the air still held the weight of day. Her hands were bare, held low and open, palms forward. She moved with deliberate slowness, one knee pressing into the earth, then the other, shifting her weight forward inch by inch. The lioness had not moved since dusk. Her body remained wrapped in a loose arc around the child, tail tucked close to her belly, head lifted only enough to track the humans without noise. She made no threat display, no huff, no growl, no twitch of muscle that would indicate alarm. But her stillness wasn't calm. It was controlled, watchful, alert, suspended in tension. Talia was chosen because she moved differently than the others. Not faster, quieter. She'd been part of the tranquilization unit before, but she preferred not to use the gun. Her work was in approach, not force. She had studied maternal behaviors in large cats, and what she saw now, from posture to proximity, wasn't confusion. It was a loss. A lioness in mourning doesn't always isolate. Sometimes she finds something small and living and stays. The child shifted. It was the first movement since the last light had faded from the sky. A subtle bend of the fingers, the elbow tucking in slightly toward his chest. His head didn't lift. His face remained pressed sideways into the packed grass. But Talia saw the breath change. Quicker now, shallow and fast. The lioness turned her head. For a long, thin moment, both sets of eyes met, Talia's and the lioness's. Then the lioness blinked, turned back toward the boy, and laid her head across her front paws. Her eyes didn't close, but she did not react further. Talia paused. 10 meters now. No barrier, no dart, no fallback option. The child was within reach if she rushed, but rushing meant noise, and noise meant teeth. Her radio buzzed faintly at her side. The voice on the other end was low, crackling. No sign of a woman. No one matching the child's age was reported missing. Local village confirms. No visitors, no hikers, no one unaccounted for. Copy? She pressed her thumb down, careful not to raise her voice. Copy. Male toddler, still unresponsive, lioness stationary, awaiting signal. They had hoped for an answer. A mother searching. A misstep on a walking trail. But the response was silence. No child reported. No woman asking. No explanation for how a toddler ended up in the wild, beside a grieving lioness, with no tracks behind him and no voice calling his name. Talia lowered herself further, now on both knees, hands still open. A beetle moved past her elbow, oblivious. She could smell the lioness now, not the sharp scent of predator sweat, but the earthy musk of dust and hide, sun and milk. The child stirred again. This time his foot kicked slightly, pressing against the lioness's front leg. The movement wasn't strong, but enough. The lioness shifted her weight, leaning gently toward him as if to steady him. Talia exhaled slowly. Then she spoke, only once and barely above the hush of insects in the brush. "It's okay, girl," she whispered. The lioness did not respond. The stakes were becoming clearer. If they waited, the child's dehydration might worsen. He had not cried, which meant his body had likely passed the early stages of panic. His limbs were not rigid, which was a small mercy, but night was settling in. Temperatures were dropping. And even with the lioness's body warmth near him, the boy's exposed skin and shallow breathing would only buy so many hours. But if they approached with the net, or with a full team, if they stepped wrong, made a sound too loud, or came too close too fast, the lioness could react instinctively. One swipe, one flinch. And the boy's small body would not survive it. Behind her, Talia heard the faint shuffle of movement. Another ranger, repositioning for coverage. She didn't look back. Instead, she reached into her side pack slowly and drew out a soft cloth, soaked earlier in filtered water. She didn't toss it. She didn't set it down. She just held it out, palm up, letting it catch the last light that still clung to the edge of the horizon. The child didn't reach for it, but his lips moved faintly. A dry, unconscious, searching motion. She placed the cloth on the ground, not close but in sight, and slid it forward with her fingertips. Then she backed her hand away. The lioness blinked. Her eyes flicked to the cloth, then to the boy. She did not move. Talia lowered her body again and waited. If the child moved toward the cloth, they might know how much strength he had left. If the lioness allowed it, they might know how close they could get. And if neither happened before nightfall, they would be forced to decide, act, or let the night decide for them. They could not wait forever, but they could wait a little longer. The grass shifted once in the wind. Far off, something called. Not a warning, just distance. The kind that carries through quiet when every breath begins to count. A pale line of light traced the horizon as dawn broke across the Ngorongoro plains. The grass swayed low in the breeze, dew clinging to its tips. The sounds of the night, jackals, wind, distant hooves, had faded. In their place came the hush of day beginning again, slow and uncertain. Talia hadn't moved much during the long hours, only shifted her weight enough to keep circulation in her legs. The lioness remained in her original position, head lowered now, eyes open but softer than before. The child still lay curled beside her belly, his breathing steady but faint. The team kept their distance, watching through scopes and binoculars, relaying occasional updates through quiet clicks on the radio. No additional movement through the night. No approach from any herd, predator, or human. Just the lioness, just the child, and the silence between them. Talia unwrapped the water bottle from the cloth in her pack. It was small, palm-sized, capped, cool from the overnight air. She held it loosely, not raising it high. Her posture remained low, respectful. Her eyes never fixed too long on the lioness's face. As she inched forward, she felt the heat return beneath her hands. The ground had begun to warm again. 6 meters. The lioness lifted her head. There was no growl, no shift in her posture, only a subtle tension through the spine, a firming of muscle beneath the fur. Her eyes locked onto the bottle. Not the woman, not the child, the object. Unfamiliar, shiny. Talia slowed, then stopped. She set the bottle down gently into the grass, resting it so it wouldn't tip. 3 meters from the child, then she backed away. 2 paces, then another. When she settled again, her arms rested loosely on her knees. The lioness did not move. Her eyes followed the bottle for a moment longer, then shifted back to the child. It was then that Talia saw it. The small hollow patch near the lioness's hind leg, a shallow depression in the grass, the bones of a cub, or what remained of one, pale fragments, a soft tuft of fur, barely recognizable, not torn apart, not devoured, just still. Talia felt the breath in her chest catch. The story reshaped itself. This wasn't just a lioness sharing space. This was a lioness grieving. A lioness whose cub had died, who had not yet left the space where it happened. And somehow, in the hours after that loss, a child had appeared. Alone. Small. Vulnerable. Just alive enough to stir something she hadn't yet let go of. The boy stirred. It wasn't much, a faint shiver, the curl of fingers against the grass, but it was movement. His head rolled slightly toward the bottle. He didn't reach for it. His arms stayed curled tight to his side, but his mouth parted, just barely. Talia leaned forward again, but didn't approach. She only watched. The lioness's gaze had shifted, too. Not to the bottle this time, but to the boy's mouth. She moved, not with force or urgency. Just a slow rise, muscles unwinding from hours of stillness. She stepped forward, placing one broad paw across the grass, and nudged the bottle with the side of her nose. It rolled gently closer to the child, brushing against his arm. She didn't touch him, but she waited, her head low, her body between him and the open plain. The boy flinched, then whimpered, a soft, broken sound, dry and faint. His fingers twitched around the bottle. He didn't open it, but he curled his hand around it like instinct, like memory. The lioness lowered herself again, returning to her crouch beside him, her back paw nearly touching the curve of his small legs. Talia watched. Every breath, every angle of the animal's limbs told the same story. The child wasn't beside her. He was with her. The lioness wasn't tolerating his presence. She was protecting him. There would be no chance to separate them easily. No moment when the lioness would simply rise and walk away. This was not a coincidence. This was something forged in the quiet of night, between loss and life, between death and the smallest hint of movement. Talia reached for the radio again. Her voice was low. Steady. Lionesses show maternal behavior. The dead cub remains confirmed. The child is responsive to object placement. Still too weak to retrieve. Recommend next step, soft sedation, low dose, if she remains stable. There was a pause, then a quiet confirmation. But even as the words settled into the air, she knew they had to wait longer. To act too soon meant risking the thread that held this fragile connection intact. A misstep could shatter it. The lioness had accepted the child without force. She had laid beside him through the night. Now she had nudged water closer without aggression. Talia exhaled and stayed where she was. The bottle rested in the boy's hand. The lioness watched. The first light of morning spread across the plains in soft ribbons, lighting their bodies, one small, one strong, both still breathing. The wind picked up around mid-morning, carrying dust low across the plains and brushing it into dry spirals between the patches of grass. The lioness hadn't moved since sunrise. Her eyes tracked the sun as it rose, but her body stayed curled around the boy. His hand still rested near the water bottle, limp but no longer clenched. His face remained turned inward toward the lioness's flank, cheek pressed into her fur as if he'd slept there before. The temperature was climbing, and so were the risks. Flies had begun to gather near his mouth. His breathing had slowed again. From the rise, behind a screen of camel thorn and brush, the dart team prepared. No full sedative, that would drop her too fast with too much weight. They needed her aware enough not to panic, slow enough not to harm. It was a calculation, not a guarantee. The child's position, tucked so tightly against her, made any decision harder. One wrong angle and she might fall on him. One wrong dose, and she might lurch or snap. The dose was halved, a mild tranquilizer delivered by air dart aimed for her shoulder. They waited for her to rise just slightly to shift her weight. Talia gave the signal. The dart flew. The lioness jerked at the impact, not violently, just a quick, startled lift of her head. She turned her neck toward her shoulder and backed half a step. The boy stirred against her. She paused. Then she sat. It did not collapse. It was a slow, deliberate descent. But they saw it begin. The tremble in her limbs, the sway in her shoulders. Her muscles loosened just slightly. Her head drooped forward. She blinked. The child whimpered. A soft, broken cry, not loud, but enough to cut through the field. At once the lioness moved, not away, not toward the team, toward the boy. Her legs buckled as she turned, but she pushed forward, stumbling once, nose grazing the child's back. She stood over him, shoulders low, her stance wide and uneven. Her claws dug into the dirt for balance. One paw slid in the grass. Her chest heaved. Her ribs, now visible beneath her thinning coat, expanded with the effort. Talia rose from her crouch. Only a few meters now. The others held back, unmoving. The lioness stood shaking, but still upright, still watching. Then she began to sway. Talia stepped forward slowly, hands out, voice low but calm. "Easy, girl. You're all right." The lioness tried again to crouch, but her weight shifted unevenly. She sank hard onto her left side, her flank landing inches from the boy's knee. The dart hadn't dropped her entirely. It never would, but it had slowed her, blurred her edges just enough. Her head remained up, eyes fluttering with effort, mouth closed, breath shallow. As Talia drew closer, she saw the truth in the lioness's body. Her abdomen was sagging, her nipples pronounced and dark, the fur thinned beneath them. Her teats, though not engorged, still showed signs of recent use. Milk had not dried fully. There were scratch marks near her hind legs, the kind cubs leave when they need for warmth or food, and her scent, that deep, bittersweet musk, was tinged with lactation. She had lost her cub, and not long ago. The grief wasn't just in her posture, it was in her skin. The boy turned again at the sound of approaching feet. His mouth opened, dry lips cracking. His eyes fluttered beneath the lids, then opened slightly. Unfocused, hazy. His body trembled. Talia knelt beside them. She didn't touch him, not yet. She laid her hand beside his, palm down, letting him see, letting the lioness see. He turned his head toward the sound, then closed his eyes again. Behind her, the medical team stepped into position. No nets, no ropes, just soft hands, gauze, hydration packs. They would not move the lioness. Not yet. Not until the child was safe. One medic reached down and brushed a small fly from the boy's lip. He didn't flinch. The lioness's breath hitched once, then slowed. She did not growl. She did not rise, but her eyes never left the boy. As they lifted him gently into the wrap, Talia kept one hand low near the lioness's paw, not touching, only steady. Her body remained in view. No threat, no fear. The boy was lifted away, blanket tucked, his breathing shallow but measurable. The wind blew gently through the grass around them. Talia looked once more at the lioness before stepping back. She had not let go. But she had let him leave, and in the soft light of mid-morning, her body, trembling, lean, and hollow from loss, spoke more truth than any call over the radio ever could. The Ranger Field station sat just beyond the bend in the valley, where the bush opened into a flat sweep of red earth and dusted stone. It wasn't built for this, for infants or lions, for loss that breathed side by side, but the staff worked quickly, laying thick canvas bedding on opposite sides of the partition fence, fitting shade cloth over the open beams, and lining the ground with quiet hands and clean water. The lioness arrived first, still under the trace effects of the tranquilizer. Her body was lifted in a sling, not dragged, not pinned. Her paws hung limp but not curled. When they placed her on the canvas, she stirred once, a long, low breath, then blinked at the scent of concrete and wood. Her head turned toward the wire. She didn't growl, she didn't move again. An hour later, the boy was brought in, swaddled in a cotton cloth, his cheeks flushed from mild sun exposure and dehydration. A field nurse had administered fluids and glucose through a slow IV drip. His vitals were stable, but shallow. His skin was warmer now, and the shallow rise of his chest carried more strength than it had the morning before. But he wouldn't take food. Not from the bottle. Not from the spoon. Not from the ranger who had whispered gently in his ear. His mouth remained closed. His eyes stayed turned away. They laid him on the bedding opposite the Lioness, 5 meters between them with chain link in the center. He stirred only when they laid him down. His body curled loosely unconsciously into a shape the Lioness mirrored minutes later. One paw tucked close beneath her chest, her head resting just above it, her ribs visible beneath the dip in her flank. The station was quiet by evening. The medical staff had stepped out. Talia remained, sitting on a stool just outside the enclosure, journal in her lap, though her pen hadn't moved in an hour. Every so often she checked the boy's pulse or watched the Lioness's breathing. But there was no change. The Lioness hadn't closed her eyes. Talia had seen sedated lions in shelters before. Most dropped into sleep eventually, but not this one. Her body rested, but her stare stayed open, fixed across the wire. She watched the boy as though he might vanish again. At one point, a cloth was dipped in water and laid gently on the boy's forehead. He didn't stir, but when the cloth fell loose, the Lioness shifted. Her paw twitched. A soft sound passed through her throat. Almost a sigh, but too deep, too low. Night came quietly. The overhead lights dimmed with the sun, replaced by a single amber bulb strung above the gate. The desert air cooled fast. A blanket was drawn up over the child's legs. The Lioness raised her head once, ears twitching at the movement. Then lowered it again. And then, just past midnight, the shelter filled with a sound that hadn't been heard since she was found. A low moan. It rose from the Lioness's chest, not forced, not sharp, but full. She wasn't injured. There was no blood, no strain. This was not a cry of pain. It was grief. The sound came in waves, short and breath-wrapped, a morning call, the kind used when lions return to a den and find silence, the kind cubs respond if they still can. She moaned again. The boy shifted. His body rolled slightly toward the fence, his hand falling outward, his fingers splayed. A second later he made a sound of his own, broken, soft, almost like a hiccup or a gasp. But it wasn't random. It echoed her rhythm. Talia rose slowly from her seat and stepped to the gate. She didn't open it. She didn't speak. The Lioness moaned again, slightly shorter this time. The boy answered again, his lips parting, his chest rising in a small, shaky breath. Not a word, not a cry. Just a sound. One carried on instinct, a mimic, a mirror, a matching thread of sadness not learned but remembered. The Lioness stood, not tall, not fast, but she lifted her weight and moved to the wire, her body long and lean, muscles visible beneath the fur. She pressed her side gently to the fence, tail hanging low, head bent downward. The boy stirred again. His hand reached out, not touching, but resting near the same place on the opposite side. Neither of them made another sound. They stood and lay like that until dawn. One Lioness leaning on wire, one child with an open hand, and the night between them, breathing. The sky had turned pale blue when the clinic vehicle arrived. Its tires moved quietly over the dirt path, slowing as it neared the shelter gate. The boy was ready, hydrated, responsive, eyes open now though still clouded with fatigue. He'd taken food for the first time that morning, a few spoonfuls of mashed banana pressed gently against his lips. He hadn't cried, but when the nurse picked him up, wrapping him in a soft cotton blanket, he turned his head, not away from her, but toward the enclosure wall. The Lioness was lying down. She had not eaten much, only a few strips of raw meat, placed carefully and left untouched for hours. She watched the preparation in silence, eyes following the nurse, the pack, the folded blanket. And then, as the gate opened and the boy was carried out, she stood. Not quickly, not like before. She walked to the far edge of her space and pressed her chest lightly against the fence. No sound, no growl, just the steady weight of her body placed against the metal as the child passed beyond her view. Talia walked beside them, hand resting on the boy's back. She didn't speak to the lioness. She didn't need to. The look was enough, a nod, small and slow, held for just a second longer than the rest. The child was taken to the nearest regional clinic, 20 kilometers north. There, his condition would be monitored. His name was still unknown. No parents had come forward. No village had claimed him. But his strength was returning. He would sleep in a clean bed now. He would be watched. The lioness remained in the shelter until the heat rose. By midday, a second team arrived with the transport crate, a wide, padded space used only for calm transfers. She stepped inside without hesitation, drawn by scent and instinct. They closed the gate behind her, not roughly, slowly, respectfully. Talia followed the truck in her own vehicle, trailing dust along the edge of the old firebreak road. She watched the crate sway gently in the bed of the truck, held by straps and shadow. No sounds came from inside, no movement. They drove south toward the basin where she had first been seen. The grass was shorter now than it had been that evening, trampled by passing herds and ranger patrols, but the place was still recognizable. The same slope. The same cluster of trees just beyond the ridge. The truck slowed, then stopped. The engine clicked as it cooled. Talia stepped out first. The wind brushed her sleeves, lifting dust in small rings around her boots. Another ranger opened the rear gate of the crate. The lioness waited. For a full minute, she didn't move. Then she stepped forward. One paw, then another. Her legs had grown stronger again, though her gait still carried a slight hesitation. She moved down the ramp into the grass, without looking back. Halfway across the clearing, she paused. There was no threat, no sound behind her, no shout, no closing of doors or sudden footsteps. She turned her head. Not fast, not startled, just one long, quiet look across the space she had come from. Her eyes didn't narrow. Her ears didn't pin. She simply looked, not for danger, not for direction, but to see if someone was still there. Talia raised her hand. A small motion, not a wave. The lioness watched her. Then she walked on, her body thinning into the grass and shadow until the rise took her, and she was gone. The clearing returned to stillness. No sound except for the rustling of dry stems and the soft creak of the crate door swinging open again, empty now. Later that day, a nurse at the clinic would record that the boy, unnamed, still silent, had reached out in his sleep. His hand, they said, curled around the edge of the blanket, as if touching something that had once breathed beside him. And on the edge of the plains, the wind moved in slow waves, brushing along the tracks of a lioness who had left with nothing and carried everything.